Whether you hike in the Uintas or the Wind Rivers or even some of our desert canyons, there are going to be days when you have to get across a stream that is a little bit big, makes you a little bit nervous. So we're going to take a look at those. So you can pause this here and write all these down. We're going to go through them one at a time, give you another chance, and then at the end, we'll finish with this screen. So anything that you don't get, you can pause it there and take a look at these. So yes, here we are. We're playing with the alphabet. Not necessarily intuitive, but that's okay. These are great to write down, teach your students. So let's begin with access. We're going to search all possibilities until we find a safe way around. So stream crossings, these examples immediately are out of the Wind Rivers in Wyoming. We're looking for access before dropping down and crossing the creek. So assess all access. There's a story of Bob Marshall up in the Brooks Range. In fact, I even got to cross this creek once. A creek that in the morning he had hiked up and it had been raining all day and he's getting up toward the Continental Divide. And after, the man was notorious for doing 50-mile days because it doesn't get dark up there. And rain on permafrost runs off just as fast as on slick rock, or almost as fast. So the little creek that he had been able to step through in the morning rose and rose and rose and got bigger and bigger. And when he got back to it, they started hiking upstream, hoping to get to where it was smaller. And there were a few places where they were just about to cross a log, and then the stream rose enough to wash the log away. So they ended up hiking all the way to the ridge to get around all of its forks and then coming back down on the other side. So adding probably 10 miles to their day. And ever since then, the official name of that creek is Walk Around Creek. But yes, you do put that time in. Generally, where the trail crosses is going to have the best crossing, but sometimes that's only true in lower water. So we are looking first, we're going to look at dry crossings. A little risky to jump over your dry crossings. And not everybody is the jumper of this woman. The next picture is of a woman who I thought would be a great jumper, a Nordic skier, cross-country skier. Yeah, it turns out she wasn't. It's pretty unpredictable as to who, for me as an instructor, knowing who's going to be great jumpers. Yeah, this is cheating, getting your dad to carry you across. Is that really a dry crossing? This boulder really is the trail. This is up in either Banff or Jasper, I've forgotten which. And that is the crossing on a snowy, slippery day like this. Probably wouldn't have been such a good idea to have that many people right there. Might have been a little safer to go one at a time. So logs are a possibility. They can be a bad possibility too. There are always sticks poking up. So if you do slip, that one's covered with moss. The bark peels off. They can be slippery. Anyway, trees are a little bit risky, so you have to decide whether you want to be walking across that with a backpack on and slip and fall on one of those branches poking up, or slip and fall down to the rocks below. And don't be too proud to sit down on a log to get across it, and just inch your butt across it. Sticks and hiking poles, trekking poles, whatever you know them as, can be very helpful. Even if they're not quite strong enough to balance or to support your weight, having that third reference point on balance is a good idea. But you should look around, find yourself a good stick if you think you need one. So there's a hefty stick. Most of us thought those logs were precarious enough that we just stomped through the water. Yeah, just go ahead, get your feet wet. If there's any question at all, having one of those logs roll on you, carrying a heavy backpack, we're still 10 miles in the backcountry here. Probably would have been just wiser to just walk through the mid-calf deep water right here. Wahoo! Yeah, no risk here, is there? That's the Provo River being crossed on a pair of skis. Much smaller creek now, Yellow Pine Creek, if I remember right. Uh, on snowshoes, not everyone was as successful. Fortunately, it was frozen over. Nobody got wet, and the snow was deep enough. Everybody just had a good laugh. But the potential for injury is there. So yeah, you're not going to find this at very many crossings, but this used to be the only way to get over to the town of Kennecott, McCarthy, in Alaska. Here there's a bridge now. It's changed. Probably the most common way to hop across a stream, trying to keep your feet dry, or at least your socks, is hopping rock to rock, and it too can be slippery, can be risky, and you might be better off just walking through the water again. But sure, there's nowhere to fall. Even if you miss the rocks and slip off them, it's not going to be very deep. Yes, having those poles can help. So there are a few spots on this crossing. You'd overtop your shoes, but nothing too serious. It's still nice to keep your shoes dry, unless you think you're going to fall in, because falling in on a slippery rock and rolling an ankle, bashing your knee, not what you want to do. Again, a little bit risky. There's that big backpack. That's Kings Peak in the background. Some years the bridge here washes out. Sometimes the bridge holds up on Henry's Fork. An unusual collection of rocks that were absolutely perfect for getting across this stream. There's no trail in the area. We just happened to bump into it. And I guess a glacier pushed them out there, left them pretty perfect for getting across. Okay, let's take a look at wet crossings. Pretty small creek here. It's raining buckets, and we already had wet feet, so I was surprised this group of students spent 45 minutes looking for a dry way across, since they already had wet feet. That's what they finally found right there. So anyway, it was a learning experience. They realized, yeah, we should have just crossed, gotten wet feet, completely safe, saved us 45 minutes. All right, so that's A, access. Access for dry, access for wet. We're looking at B now. So we're looking at crossing, wet, and looking at bottom texture. So the gals on the left with that gigantic fly rod case have got a pretty bouldery bottom, and it's easy to slip and slide. It's like walking on bowling balls. Where the picture in the lower right, that's some pretty nice crossing material. That's just cobbles and gravel. So no surprises when you step in. But yeah, you get what you get. You just have to be extra cautious as the boulders get bigger. Mostly the bottom is going to be a lot like the immediate banks. So you can see this is old glacial till. Fairly consistent size. None of those boulders are much bigger than a foot. Hard to call them boulders, mostly cobbles. Pretty easy to cross. Here we're just seeking out less depth from spot to spot. C, the current. One of the things that people use as a standard is that if you throw a stick in and you walk alongside it, if it gets ahead of you, it's probably too fast to cross. If you are out walking it, then it's safer. You'll hear that. But it also depends on depth. So if it's ankle deep, it can be faster than that. But by the time it's mid calf or knee, and it's faster than you can walk, you're going to have a hard time getting across, or you might even decide not to cross. You'll need a team crossing that we'll talk about. But yeah, if it's really slow current, you can go in pretty deep. Speaking of current, water tends to go in a straight line until it's deflected. So water is going to always push to the outside edges. So you can see a bit of an S curve in here, the lower part. So that outside edge to the right at the bottom is going to be your deepest, fastest, water. And on the inside of that same turn is going to be shallow water. So if you were coming from the left side of this picture and you walk out to that point in the inside of the bottom S, and you look at it and go, wow, that's really shallow. So you start walking, but you would hit the deepest, fastest water across to the right. So more often than not, but not always, you're looking for the straightaways, and you're looking for places where the current isn't being speeded up. The other problem with the outside edges is with that faster, deeper water, it tends to undercut the banks. And that's where big boulders will get exposed by the erosion, or trees will tip over. So yeah, the outsides of those bends can be among the worst places to try to cross. So keep looking. As I said, current speed matters along with depth. So here we are mid-calf. It's over the tops of the boots. We've got people watching out for each other, but especially with pull, it's pretty easy to get across right here. There used to be a bridge here. You can see the person in the red shorts to the left is standing on an old platform for one side of the bridge. Mid to calf deep, mid calf deep. Uh, this is a student that had some balance problems, and we just walked him through everything. He did not jump well. It was good to learn that early on in the trip, and we worked on his balance, and he got actually quite good by the end. So we did learn from him. D now, depth. And again, depth is combined with current. So here we have close to no current. So yes, even that deep you can get across. But if you've got a strong current, as we talked, knee deep can be too much. Group of students, high water year. This is often a pretty small crossing. This is the widest spot we hit. There's good current above. There's current below here. But this is a big wide spot in Pole Creek. And you can see that for some of the folks here, it was up to their belt buckles. Some of the bottoms of those backpacks got wet, but it still wasn't pushy. There wasn't any problem of getting knocked over. Different creek, same group of people. And you'll see here that the water is kind of right at pushing up at the limit, just below her knees, the person in the back. And yeah, that's about the limit of solo crossing when it's getting close to the knees. We've hunted a wide spot again, and our tallest guy is there on the left. We're going from right to left to get across. And crossing over to that island was easy. That's as deep as it got. But then he discovered that the far side of the island was at least armpit deep. So we did have to retreat back. But we did find up at the upper end of the island this is as deep as it was at the upper end. So we did get across. It was a high water year, higher than most years. And yes, we were a little bit worried if you weren't extra tall, getting the bottoms of your backpacks wet. So several people did carry their packs. And this is a year later. There was a low, very low snow year, and that's within a few hundred feet of the other crossing. It just that year it just didn't matter where you crossed. So entry and exit. You don't want to be crossing over and having bushes, cliffs on the other side that won't allow you to get out. And if you do get washed downstream, you want to be able to get out on either side if you need to. So you are looking for friendly banks. You can see getting out in those willows up and down there could be a problem, or having log jams on the sides. We'll talk about strainers and what a hazard they are. So you do look at both shores, entry and exit. When the water is up at the limits of what you can cross, you probably will lose ground as you go across. So looking at those entry and exit spots, do watch, do look across the river and downstream, because you can get pushed a ways downstream. Yes, this is a gorge that we would have had to have hiked miles and miles to get to where it was friendly. Fortunately, there is a bridge on this route. This is in Iceland. All right, F, foot entrapment. So boulders, roots, logs submerged. are places if you are in a current, especially if it's over your knees, into your thighs, and you hook a foot between two boulders or under a boulder or under a root, and the current knocks you over, the only way out is to go back upstream to get your foot out, and you can't do that without help. So as you're crossing, cross very slowly and really not just step quickly, but feel around with your feet and make sure there aren't any hollow spots that you could get your foot entrapped in. Here's a good place on one of our desert trips where you could really lose your shoes. This is a little bit goofing off. The actual crossing spot was much nicer than this. We do have quicksand. Quicksand is always wet. There's no dry quicksand. And you can get really stuck in it. And it can look quite a bit like this. I'm glad he got out. So feet fits right in here with our F's, and I'm just going to say, no matter what you see in the other videos, no matter what anybody says to you, absolutely always have your feet covered. I know I'm showing you the video from that gal, and she crossed in flip-flops, and that's no protection at all. So boots, whatever it is you're hiking in, they're going to get wet in the rain. They're going to get wet in the mud. Just leave your shoes on. Don't bring an extra pair just for crossing. You don't get blisters anymore because you got your feet wet in a crossing than if you got your feet wet in the rain. And you need your feet. They are absolutely your only way out. So always, always, always protect your feet. I don't let people go barefoot even around camp. Open-toed shoes just aren't allowed. Anytime you're dependent on your feet for getting out and finishing a trip. We are clear up to G. Group assisted or team crossings. So the simplest is you help each other. Somebody stands still. There's one place where the current is strong, and you just stand there in shallower water and take a hold of the person coming up behind you or out ahead of you. So a simple one-handed group assist. Not much different here. Now we've got two people. They're just using each other for balance. That way you've got four legs. If one gives you trouble, you got three more. So holding on to each other. Some people hold straps. Some people hold hands. But yeah, just helping to stabilize each other. It's a little bit helpful. It's not a full team crossing. Closely related, now we've got three people on our team. So this one gets the name of the chain crossing, and it's just holding hands. And now we've got 6 legs in case one goes down. They are holding on. They're moving out into the faster water here. And eventually it did get up to their shorts. Didn't get a picture at the deepest spot. And crossing out on the other side, just helping each other. Pretty simple, straightforward, cobbly bottom. So just holding hands was enough to support each other. These are big team rescues, or not rescues, crossings. And you can see that's waist deep water out there. The people nearest us is a pyramid, a triangle, whatever, a wedge, I think is more common name for it. Your upstream person, which is upstream is to the left, the current's flowing to the right. In this case, they're using a paddle upside down, a stick, or hiking poles. And then the problem when you're looking at that huddle group is what happens as it gets deeper is you start to float. So you don't weigh enough is the reason you wash away, plus the push against the larger part of your body. So in the wedge, the advantage is all the people behind can be pushing down on the person in front. So normally you would put your biggest person in front. This group was trying it with their smallest person. So they didn't get much farther than where that huddle group is. The huddle group, just seconds after that picture, the current blew them apart and they washed away. And that the person trying to cross solo behind them, once they were no longer protected in the eddy behind the huddle group, they also just got knocked over and had to swim to shore. But this was a river rescue class, and we were teaching them how to cross a stream by letting them try it beyond what they could do walking. We certainly had them practice swimming in harder water than that first. Uh, Part of the rescue class again, but this was during lunch, so they were out of their wetsuits and life jackets. And I asked these three to just see how far they could go and feel comfortable. So the guy holding onto the stick in the front is an alpine ski racer, a very powerful man. The white T-shirt, the guy's 6'5". The gal behind them is much smaller, and they were pretty comfortable here. Mid calf deep, you can see his right knee is starting to go in. And at that point, they said, nope, no more, not without life jackets and helmets. So there it is. It's over the tops of his knees, even with that big guy holding. You can see he is pushing down hard on him so he doesn't wash away. And they said, yeah, that's it. We're coming back. That is the absolute limit of what we're comfortable with. So here's a team of three, full backpacks, Teo Creek in the Wind Rivers, and nasty cobbly bottom, big boulders. Not deep. You can see it's well below the knees, but balance was difficult because of the boulders. So bottom texture here really mattered. With backpacks on, this has proved to be probably the best of the stream crossing team techniques, group techniques, and that's just a train. So you put a big person up front, and everybody holds onto the backpack, and that's why it works better, because the side-by-side stuff with backpacks on, it gets a little unwieldy. But straight in line, the first person is braking most of the current, the second person brakes more, and by the back, there's not a lot of pressure on the last person. This is just practice in case we hit bigger streams later on. We were able to cross this, and you just walk sideways one step at a time, carefully talking to each other, telling people, oh, slow down or speed up. Oh, I got a rock. I got to work around it. Hold on. So team crossing, especially with backpacks, the train seems to be the most effective. This is a reluctant group to cross this stream just because it's getting to be late in the day, and you can see we're still camped in snow. This is all snow runoff. This was one very cold crossing. And here's the next group crossing in the same spot. And I haven't mentioned it yet, but having spotters downstream in case somebody does lose their balance to be able to help pull them to shore. Help them regain their balance. People that are not wearing their backpacks can be a lot more agile to help people. And keeping the team down to 3 or 4 people, and then with extra spotters around. This is the reason for that crossing. This bridge had broken the high water earlier in the spring. Well, actually, it'd been the spring before, and had not ever been repaired, as you can see. Stream hazards that you're watching out for, especially things that are downstream of you. So yeah, an obvious thing would be a waterfall. You would not want to do a risky crossing just above a waterfall. So even, this is a shallow crossing, but just for example, some waterfall below it. Strainers are very dangerous. So 3 different strainers in this picture: the barbed wire fence, the most common, trees, branches, logs, log jams, and yes, not in the wilderness, but in an awful lot of places where you might go fishing, farmers will push vehicles into the water to try to hold up the bank. It usually ends up being counterproductive. So a strainer, like one that would be in your sink, one that you would be catching rice, colander for pasta. The idea is that the water will flow through, but solid objects don't. So that's pretty bad if you're getting pushed underwater into the branches. The water keeps going through and keeping its pressure up against you, but you're being held down in those branches. So yeah, trees are tempting to cross, but if they involve branches and other trees downstream of them, you probably want to get below them. You don't want to cross above strainers. That includes your entry and exit, because that's where your branches and logs are most likely to be, is near the banks. And you want to be clear of those when you enter and exit. So understanding current flow in a stream, we're looking at a cross section, looking downstream, straight downstream. And understanding this will help you understand the feeling that you have if you're floating. So if you're down there at the bottom is going to be your slowest water. It's going to have the most friction against the boulders. And then the water above it is riding along at the speed of that slow water plus its own speed. So it's slipping on by faster and faster and faster as you get to the top. So you can imagine that if your head was just poking out, your shoulders and chest were in that fastest section, your hips are down at the next line, and your feet are down in the slowest, what you're going to feel like is the fast water is pushing the top of you over, that your feet feel like they're getting sucked behind you, and you're going to tip forward and your feet will get behind you and your face will get pushed in the water. So you don't want to do that. You want to, if you are in the water, if you are ever swimming, you want to have your feet out ahead of you, downstream and up in the same speed of water as much as possible. You want your feet down ahead of you to push off boulders, to push off logs, to push off log jams. And then you want to be planing as high and flat as possible. So, and then swimming sort of backstroke would be more like breaststroke on your back. And angling off to the side and keeping your feet out there to protect you rather than going head first, face first down the river. The hole or a depression in a river is a term you'll hear about, and it's good to understand them. These will be in everything from as small as a crack in the gutter after a good rain to something large enough to capture rafts in them. So the flow here is from left to right, and there is something in the water that might poke up or it might just drop off. It's often a boulder, it might be a ledge. In the rural world, it might be a small dam, a diversion for irrigation. They're the worst because they're smooth and consistent all the way across. But let's look at this cross-section flow with water flowing from left to right. So the water, when it gets compressed to fit over the top of that boulder in this case, and then it speeds up as it drops down the other side. So it thins out, it speeds up and it thins out and drops clear to the bottom of the rock. But when it hits the bottom on the other side, then it starts to slow down and stack up on top of itself. Some of the water, especially the deep water, is going to go through down deep. Some of the water is going to come right up to the surface and you'll see lots of bubbling right there. And some of that water will flow downstream, some of it will flow back upstream into a turbulent filled-in depression or hole. So where that looks like a tadpole is spinning is very aerated water. And depending on the size of this, that reversal could be bigger than you are tall. So you will just get rotated around and around in there. The more you float, the more likely you are to get caught in there. So if you do end up going off one of these things, you do want to ball up, pull your legs in, which will reduce your surface area and hopefully keep you from hitting anything and keep you down into that deeper water for longer. If you are instead stuck in a reversal like that, your only chance often is to swim as much as you can off to one side, hoping that one of the sides is going through. But that's more for a river rescue class. You should never cross above a big thing like this that you wouldn't, that's more than knee deep, because you can get stuck. So our last letter here, ice and snow bridges. So we're going to take a look at these. That's quite a snow field up there with a creek running through it. This creek is more than waist deep, even though it's pretty narrow there. It'd be tempting to just go up onto the snow and walk across, but you wouldn't know exactly when you were over the creek. You do want to be on the downstream side. You do not want to have that the flow going into a covered area, because if you did wash in, you would be underneath the snow. So do cross it in the best spot you can find downstream of that snow. Sometimes you will find strong bridges, and sometimes they won't be very strong. So we're looking at a creek here flowing through the water on Rainier, and where that arrow is, it's hard to tell, but that gap there is probably 5 feet high, and it would not be a place where you would want to cross on that snow bridge, which at this water level, there are plenty of places where you can see the creek and you wouldn't be on a snow bridge. But this is where, in another spot, still on Rainier, you can see there's a little bit of a snow bridge that people are crossing. They probably would have been safer to just step in the water in that hole. The snow bridge was holding, people are crossing. Just knowing that, and also that creek is barely ankle deep. So on this spot, it's not too big of a hazard. Just deep springtime snow. No creek under there in this case, but disappearing into it. I think I have mentioned that I had a student once drop like that boulder out ahead of them. They tend to have hollows all around them. The rock and the earth give off a little bit of heat and melt out a bit of a hollow spot. And a gal went to put her pack down on it and just disappeared. It was a hole over 6 feet deep. And of course, she had to be rescued. Fortunately, she didn't hurt herself. Ice makes me think of cold and hypothermia too. So crossing late in the day or on a stormy day, you might think about shortening your mileage that day and crossing the next day when it's warmer, you hope. Or just when you do get to the other side, make sure everybody gets warmed up. I've only seen this once. This is the Dirty Devil River down in southern Utah, not far from Hanksville. And the nights were in the mid-teens below zero. So an unusually cold stretch, and the river froze all the way across. We had assumed we would just have a cold crossing, and it's usually not more than knee deep. This was still pretty frightening, wondering if this was going to support us or not. And a week later, a friend of one of the people with me went back, and the temperatures had warmed up, and they did break through the ice, and someone almost got sucked away underneath. Fortunately, it wasn't deep enough to really finish hauling them off underneath the ice, because there would have been no way out for miles. Especially in the spring when you have fluctuating water with the heat of the day. So we got to this stream crossing, and normally here it's something you can step over with dry feet. But there was no getting across this late in the afternoon. So we waited, camped here, camped a few miles short of where we had intended to. And in the morning it was still raging. So we were not able to cross here at all. We ended up backing up a couple of miles, and you can see Reed Lake there. You can see the trail cutting between two wide spots in Reed Lake, and then a little stream, a narrow spot, and we crossed it where that trail crossing is. So that had melted out, but it was still deep, but it was really slow. It really was part of the lake, and we're able to cross, even though the main crossing that we had intended to use was not crossable even in the morning after a cold night. Our alphabet didn't catch everything, so we do have some additional considerations to take a look at next. But what do you wear? So wind pants or shorts or underwear. Wind pants can help keep you a little bit warmer. They can stop a little bit of that convective heat loss, not a lot, but they flap and have a lot of extra drag in the water. So you might lose your balance. So wearing shorts is often a better choice. And then when you get to the other bank, dress warm again. All right, you've already heard from me, wear boots. Just whatever it is, whatever the shoes are, the most protective shoes. This is a really critical time to take good care of your feet. You can't see what you're stepping on, what you can get pinched in between, how sharp things are. So absolutely wear your footwear. Don't go with sandals, flip-flops. Okay, then the next one, the controversy is waist belts. Not everybody considers it controversy. They just say undo all your buckles. So sternum strap, I've never heard anyone say leave it on. But yeah, so the sternum strap is the one up just under your chin. Unbuckle that one. Depending if this is a hard one on the waist belt, because having your waist belt buckled gives you much better balance. But it is hard to unbuckle if you are being tumbled down a rocky stream like this. So this crossing, had the guy with the orange backpack gone to the left of that rock, would have never gone over his knees. I was surprised when he chose to go right and went the deeper side of that rock. Strong guy made it still just knee deep, and everyone else went left side. But you can see that their waist belts are unbuckled. They are ready to eject those packs if should they fall in. Ropes can be a help, but in the wrong hands, they're more of a hazard than they are helpful. So you can't see it in this picture, but we do have a rope stretched across the person crossing. You can see it's above their knees. At that point, most of it's not. And the rope is being held by people on both sides. So if for any reason the rope starts being a problem, they can let go. You would never ever tie into a rope. It's better to not tie the rope to shore when you're doing this, although you might have to on one side. And you want to be downstream of the rope. If you tie into a rope, if you tie it around your waist and you slip and go in, it's going to work like the reverse of a water ski. So a water ski, you plane up onto the surface, your body is going to plane to the bottom. So ropes are a bad idea. River rescue people always carry knives in case something does go wrong with one of their rope systems, that they can cut the whole thing loose. So the last person to have to cross, back there in yellow shorts, we've got a spotter that's waded out in below knee deep. The last person to cross here is holding the rope. It is not tied around him. And then same thing on the shore. It's not tied to anything on the shore. He's just using it upstream of him as he pendulum walks sideways across. Tyrolean traverse, this is a mountaineering trick. Somebody has to cross first. You still need spotters. If you can get one person across, you can probably get everyone across. But anyway, it's out there as a potential solution, requiring at least one person to get across without the rope. But yes, if you did have a lot of gear to haul, a lot of inexperienced people, it's a possibility. So here we are with the final slide. If you didn't catch all those as we went, here's a great spot to pause this video and catch up on your writing. Thanks again for watching, and enjoy your trips out there.